are neurotoxins, and everything I'm going to talk about in one way or another is on www.breggin.com. It's one of the richest websites scientifically, and except for the books, everything is free on it. And I'll point out some aspects that you might want to go to at different times. Warning, this is not just to cover myself. This is the truth. It's dangerous to start psychiatric drugs. It's dangerous to change the dose up or down. It's dangerous to stop them. Because you see, the brain is at war, constantly at war with whatever psychiatric drug you're taking, because it experiences it as a neurotoxin. And I'm going to explain that to you a little bit more. So the brain constantly is trying to reach some safe equilibrium with the drug. So when your doctor starts, then it's a big shock. And your doctor, when you start getting really weird in the beginning on the drug, will say, no, that can't be. It doesn't have an effect until 6 weeks. Now, the reason they say it doesn't have an effect until 6 weeks is the drugs don't work at all, really, in their clinical trials, so they're assuming they start working at 6 or 8 weeks. The trials are only 6 weeks, or 4 weeks. Or in the case of the Adderall XR, you're giving the kids 3 weeks. That's all the trials are. Why? Because how long can people stand a neurotoxin? You'll have more adverse effects than you can imagine it as you continue taking the drug. Probably all psychiatric drugs cause withdrawal symptoms because the brain has changed. So you're with your unprotected brain that's no longer balancing itself against the toxin. And that's how all withdrawal occurs. And in addition, on top of that, stimulants and benzodiazepine tranquilizers, the stimulants we give our kids, Adderall, which is amphetamine, and Ritalin, which is very much like amphetamine, Focalin, and the benzos like Xanax and Ativan, clonazepam, they're all grossly addictive and can be extremely hard to get off of. So a warning, withdrawal from psychiatric drugs can cause so much emotional suffering that you can't get off them. And I've seen people who've been on these drugs for a long time agonize down to droppers of Prozac, trying to get off these drugs. They change the brain so dramatically that some people don't get off of them, especially if you've been on combinations for many months and years. Oh, I see somebody taking pictures. This will go up on my website, Breggin.com, either now or in the next few hours. I sent it to my assistant. And if you just go down the left-hand side of says something like, things I'm proud of. It doesn't say that, but that's what the columns are. And you'll see under special topics, you'll see this presentation that I'm doing right now available to you. So you don't have to fuss, you don't have to study, you don't have to get overwrought. You're just going to get it and download it, hopefully now or tomorrow, certainly. So reducing and stopping psychiatric drugs outside a hospital should be done cautiously and carefully. Hopefully you'll get some experienced supervision. And I've written a whole book about it, Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal. The book here is very good for covering everything, medication madness, and it even has a chapter on withdrawal. But to give your clinician, or if you're a clinician, the book that will teach them, A, first part, what these drugs do to you, B, how do you get off them, that would be psychiatric drug withdrawal. Psychiatric drugs are neurotoxins. They poison the brain. They injure brain cells. They cause severe biochemical imbalances. They are tailored to do this. They're tailored to cross the blood-brain barrier and disrupt the mind and behavior. So how do you, for example, how does the drug company get something like a decision that this drug can be an antipsychotic drug? Well, they give it to, first they see if it contains something that looks like it'll block dopamine. Dopamine is a major neurotransmitter to your wonderful frontal lobes that makes you interested in today and makes you love, gives you the opportunity to worship God or to hate life or to feel mean. All this stuff that goes into us is evolved in these big frontal lobes. And the antipsychotic drugs knock off the entire functioning main trunk to the frontal lobes. Imagine that. And those drugs, many of you could even be taking because a lot of them are given for, quote, as antidepressants. You're not even told that Abilify is in fact an antipsychotic or Seroquel is in fact an antipsychotic or Risperdal or Zyprexa or any of the whole host. And you'll see lists of these drugs in the back of Medication Madness, which is on sale here, and in the back of all of my recent books. But they not only produce so let me tell you what the drug companies do. So first they decide, is the drug going to block dopamine? That will convince the FDA to consider the drug at least. And secondly, does it disrupt animal behavior? Because if you're blocking a poor rat's dopamine, you're disrupting not only the frontal lobes, but also the coordination centers in the basal ganglia where the dopamine starts. So you give it to a rat, and you turn the rat over, and if the rat has difficulty getting erect and standing, it's called catalepsy. And that's one more indication. So Risperdal, which advertised itself, the liars, that it was atypical and was somehow really different, was a major dopamine blocker, and in proving it to the FDA to get started, they mentioned this ugly, stupid thing of catalepsy as a good thing to show they were developing an antipsychotic. That's how bad it is out there, folks. It's worse than you can possibly imagine. Now, this diagram is impossible to read, I'm sure, and that's good. Because, first of all, what I want to tell you is the brain is so complicated. If you think about the physical universe, Einstein sat back in his easy chair and imagined the physical universe and some of its most basic, complex, and new functions, like E equals mc squared, like the bending of light and relativity, and so on. Well, nobody has ever sat in an easy chair and come up with anything to explain the brain. We don't have a Newton of the brain. We don't even have a Bernini of the brain or a Kepler. If you go look up prize winners, Nobel Prize winners in neurology or neuroscience, they're going to have invented a new stain or figured out synapses. We know nothing about this. You're pouring garbage into God's most elaborate, or evolution's most elaborate, subtle, impossible to understand place with billions of cells that have trillions of connections. Some of the cells have 10,000 synaptic connections to other cells. Some are so small you can't see them on a microscope. Some of them are running down from the brain to your spine. The complexity is beyond human imagination. Everything they're telling you about drugs working is PR points. Everything. So what I wanted to show you here, just so you get an idea about it, all right, here is, whoops, that's the wrong thing. But as brilliant as I am, look what I just did. Yeah, I went backward or forward. There. All right, this is cell A. And this is the cell's end, where it's dropping into a space called a synapse. Bunches of packets. This is serotonin packets. We're making believe we got an antidepressant here. And I want to show you a couple of things. First of all, the line was human beings have a biochemical imbalance that makes them need serotonin, so we'll jack up serotonin. It's all BS. It's made up. It's like, Charlie Brown, one of his cartoons, there were 17 million leaves on that tree. Well, how'd you figure that out, sir, Charlie? I made it up. And that's what they're doing in the pharmaceutical industry. They're just making it up. And their textbooks, and their graduate courses. They're making it all up. So, in this situation, here is the little places that release the packets of serotonin They're coming out there, out the chute, they're coming out there. Now, if you can't see it too well, but there's a place here that's taking the serotonin to remanufacture it. I don't even want you to understand this because this is so ridiculously oversimplified. But I want to give you two ideas about what's really happening. So, what's happening is the brain is doing a natural process. It puts out these chemicals and then it reabsorbs them, it controls it. What the drug does, any drug that's messing with serotonin pretty much, which is a lot of drugs, it blocks the removal from here. You're flooding the engine. That's an ancient concept from when we used to have old cars. And if you hit them too hard on the pedal or gas pedal, it would flood the engine and it would gasp. Well, you're flooding the engine. So what do you think the brain thinks about that? What it does with the first dose is it shuts down the production of serotonin. So you're immediately, and that's why horrible things happen in the first 3 days, which your doctor will say is your mental illness all the time, pretty much, nowadays. He won't say, no, you're developing a serotonin syndrome, or you're getting agitation, or you're getting depressed, or, it's probably from starting the drug. So it shuts down, and then it doesn't restart for a while, and then it starts to restart and try to find a balance. But while it's doing that, the system that is taking it out, and there's a little arrow there, it may be red or something like that, and that arrow shows you that that system that is being blockaded, in technical language, hypertrophies. It says, you can't stop me by putting molecules on my conveyor belt so I can't get my serotonin out, and it builds up in strength. So you get an abnormally vigorous resistance, not only in the blockading, not putting out serotonin, but in the removing of serotonin. They're going to remove it anyway. And then finally, and perhaps the saddest of all, over here on this side, there are receptors that are grabbing serotonin. There's innumerable ones, many, many receptors. And by the way, there's multiple types. It's all nonsense. When they made up their theory of biochemical imbalance, they didn't even have more than 1 or 2 types. I've lost track of 6 or 8 or 10 now types of receptors for serotonin. So what happens to the receptors? Well, they're getting flooded too, right? So they die back. Animal studies, I have to tell you, because nobody else is, animal studies is that at 18 months you don't always get recovery from a few weeks of exposure. So, now, you think that's complicated? All right, imagine in that synapse there are 50 neurotransmitters. See, we don't even know how many there are. From genetic studies, it looks like there's hundreds. We identify a few dozen. That's how bizarre all this BS is. So you've got this enormously complex thing. It could have a dozen or more other nerves. It could have dozens of other things in this little soup, all of which is minuscule and is all intertwined and tangled about, all of it producing my ability to speak. This is more complicated than the whole universe. The universe doesn't speak, doesn't think. The physical universe isn't as complicated as your brain. Treasure your brain. Treasure your... Don't hit yourself in the head. Don't take neurotoxins. But if you come off, do it carefully. Do it very carefully. Well, I forgot all I have to do is press the button. So medications don't fix biochemical imbalances because there are no imbalances in the brains of psychiatric patients until the first dose of the psychiatric drug. How is that for a big lie? You've got a biochemical imbalance, not until you take the doctor's drug. Isn't that awful? Psychiatric drugs work by harming the brain and the mind. Now, this is part that's going to get me in trouble. This is also true of all psychoactive substances. It's just that these drugs are worse. It's harder to get off a lot of these drugs than to get off of heroin. These drugs are more damaging than the opiates. Most of them. More damaging than the opiates, and they can be harder to get off than the opiates. Not that I like opiates. But marijuana the psychoactive portion of marijuana, everything I'm saying about antipsychotics is true, and alcohol, because they're all neurotoxins. That's the only way you can get something so strong in the brain that it changes